Welcome back to lesson 3, the 4 loom knit stitches. Yes, there's 4 loom knit stitches. We'll be going over all of these from the tightest to the loosest, and we'll also be showing you different properties so you understand why you would choose the one you did so that you can make beautiful garments and fabrics. Welcome to Good Knit Kisses. We're all about helping you stitch your love and love your stitches. Well, I've got my loom turned upside down today, and I've got 4 different knit stitch samples here to show you. First of all, I want to show you that we are looking at what's called the right side of the fabric. If I was to turn this loom this direction where the pegs are facing up and we're looking at it from the side, this pretty fabric falls this way, and we see this front of this fabric come out to where we can see it when we pick it up. Okay, it's just hanging off of it. That's called the right side. So I flip this over so that you can see all the right sides of these fabrics, and I want you to notice something on there. These 3 here look very similar, and I'll zoom in and kind of show you these in a moment. I'm going to take them off of the loom and really get to know some of the stitches a little bit better, but I want you to see them actually on the loom and see how they're kind of stretched out and things like that. But also, I set this up in more of a clock position because I'm showing you, because we have different learners, I want to show you visually kind of what I put in my brain to say, okay, this is the best scenario at the one position, like a clock, and then it kind of progressively gets further and further away from traditional knit stitches like on needles. And then it goes all the way, these are 3 different knit stitches to make different sizes, and then this one over here looks very different because it is a twisted knit stitch. So let me just name them before I take them off of the loom so you can see them all together here. This one is the true knit stitch. Also, some people call it the reverse purl. This one is the U knit stitch, which is very close to the true knit stitch. And then we have the flat knit stitch, which is very tight. Okay, so if you were going to go in tightness scale, you would say flat is good, U knit's better, true knit is best. It takes longer to do. And then E-wrap is super fast, and it's going to be a stretchier stitch, and it looks different. While I'm taking these off of the loom, I want to show you what the back of them looks like. This is actually the inside of the loom. See when they hang down like this? This is the wrong side or the back side of the knit stitches, and you can see the purl bumps. The purl bump is the opposite of the knit stitch. It's always on the back. You can intentionally make a purl bump, which we'll do in a further lesson, but it's always the reverse of the knit stitch. And so you can also see here how stretched out they are on the loom, and then as it starts getting knitted longer, it starts relaxing. And this is what we talked about in the overview video, which you can see if you want to click down on the link below. But this is the stitches nice and relaxed down here and truer to the final size, and they are curling. You can see all of them are curling because all 4 of these knit stitches, when you make all knits on the right side, it is called a stockinette or stocking stitch, depending upon which country you're in or patterns you're looking at. So I'm going to go ahead and pull them off the loom and show you what they look like on the front to compare. As you can see, I had 4 samples on the loom before, and I was able to work them individually, and I can also work right to left and left to right, and that's another reason why it's okay for you to learn both directions, because in order to make a flat panel like this, you have to be able to work back and forth. So when we talked about it's okay to work in either direction, absolutely true. You can work with whatever hand you want. So the knit stitch is a V-shaped stitch, and you can see that very clearly in this sample here. Let's look at this little stitch right here. I'm just going to point with my needle here. Right here is the V. You can see this is the middle, and then these 2 lines come up with the V. Now, when I first started learning, I kind of saw the reverse, and you may see it, you kind of flip it in your brain. I started looking at this part like this, and it looked like it was going up to me, but you've got to kind of look in between that and look at this part here, because that's the actual stitch. So like where this is right underneath it is totally covering it. So on the left and right, you can see that I have the little V stitches lining up. So if that's a little easier for you to see. And anyway, this one right here, this stitch is the true knit stitch. This is the stitch that is the closest to needle knit, I want to show you a couple of samples of some projects. This particular sample here that I'm going to show you is actually made from a master knitter that I actually won this from her, and this is not my garment. So if you ask me questions, I won't be able to say much about it other than it's a beautiful construction. But I want you to see the hand and how it feels, but also all of this field of stitches are all knit stitches. This is just a simple stockinette stitch, and you can make a beautiful garment with just a plain knit stitch, and then the edge, like a different edge detailing, and then of course this is a real specialty edge. But you want to get a fabric that has that nice smooth look. You see how this is very smooth to the touch. It's not bumpy at all. So all these little tiny V shapes, no matter what size, are still a knit stitch. And of course when you flip it over on the inside, you see the reverse stitch, which is all these purls. Okay, so the right side is the front smooth side, and the wrong side is the reverse. We call this stockinette or stocking stitch. Okay, here's another sample here where we've got some lace work worked in, but you can still see these V-shaped stitches that are in here. Okay, this part right here. Also another sample with this hat. You can see all the stockinette. And even this one right here, which has got fair eye, all these extra little V-shaped stitches in here. Some people call this a heart stitch. This is not a heart stitch. This is actually a stitch worked into, it's just another color popped in here, and they're just little V's, and they're just a knit stitch. There's not a specialty stitch, but it's a specialty technique of working with two strands of color. Okay. So let's look at the different stitches here. I've got them in order from smallest to largest. The one on the left is the flat knit stitch, and that will be our very next video. The video after that will be the U-wrap knit stitch, and then the next one is the true knit stitch. And the fourth and final video on the knit stitches is the E-wrap stitch. And then after that, we'll also show you how to do a purl stitch, but that's in the next lesson 4. So lesson 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, and 3.4, we're going to show you how to make these stitches. Let's go over the characteristics of them. The flat knit stitch is a tighter stitch. This is actually one where if you've got a loom where your spacing is just, it's a little too big for the recommended yarn weight, if you wanted to really use that yarn that really should be on a smaller width loom, then you could try the flat knit stitch, and it pulls and draws your stitches in much tighter. This is a popular stitch used on socks especially, so keep that one in mind. The next stitch is the U-wrap knit stitch, and it's a much faster stitch to learn than the traditional knit stitch, but it does have some drawbacks. When I first started learning this one, my U-wrap knit stitches were closer to a flat knit, and I kept getting them really tight. And now, if I measure out these samples, my traditional knit and my U-wrap knit look nearly identical, and the sizing is like really close, like an eighth of a difference when I start measuring an eighth of an inch difference. The hand of it, or the feel of it, is the same as the knit stitch, and it looks really good. In fact, you can tell I use this one a lot because it's really consistent. In fact, it's more consistent looking than my true knit stitch because I actually don't use this one as much. So this is a promise of, if you really like the fastness of this one, you can get better, and I have some tricks to making this one consistent and not super tight like the flat knit if you are a tight loom knitter, because I was too. This last one here is the E-wrap, and you can see that it's really stretchy and it's not as smooth. You see how the bumps are twisted? Okay, this is a Y shape. It's not the traditional V. It's almost like you've got this extra little bump on top. That's why we call it a Y shape, because imagine this part's crossing over. And when we go in one direction, you can see it cross over really big this way. And then when you turn back the other direction, you can see it cross big over here. So it's like you've got this Y and a Y, and they're laying over each other like that. And it's kind of interesting. But it can be a little too stretchy or very holey. So if you weren't using an appropriate yarn weight with your loom, say you were using a number 4 weight in this E-wrap stitch, it's going to be really stretched out and look more like you're trying to attempt to make a lace instead of something more drawn in and specific like this one, like where it's more closed in, to getting something very consistent, or even more drawn in than this. You could even use a heavier weight yarn. This is a 6, but of course there's different weights of 6 weight yarns. In fact, this one right here, Premier Everyday, calls for a larger needle size. When you look at the directions here, when it calls for a super bulky 6, it calls for a 9mm or US 13 needle. And the one that I'm using here is Bernat Beyond, and it calls for an 8mm or US 11 needle. So it's actually a smaller needle. So the different weights of yarns can make a difference, especially when it comes to the E-wrap. So just keep that in mind. And then these two knit stitches look very different when used on the very same loom and the very same yarn. You can see that the E-wrap stitch covers more ground. It gives you a bigger swatch, if you will, or a bigger project. It's looser looking, but if I put these two next to each other, there's a good 1.5 inches or so of the E-wrap stitch versus the flat knit. You can see how much this one draws in. I cast on the same amount of stitches here. This is 10 stitches wide, so this side right here is lined up. So if I'm trying to cover more ground with my project and I'm trying to go really fast, this is great. But if I want something like a really fine knit, something that has closed-in stitches, I'm going to want to stick with something that's not going to be so airy. The other thing is this is called the twisted knit stitch, obviously because it's twisted, but in needle knitting, you actually don't see it as often, and sometimes it's just called through the back loop because that's the way that they use it on the needle, and it's worked on the needle, but it's also called twisted. But it's used for very specific reasons to get that stretchiness in a few places, or it's used to set up for another technique. So you don't see it actually as often, but this is a very popular stitch that many manufacturers recommend, and it's very characteristic of loom knit items, and people see this stitch a lot, especially from beginners. And sometimes you'll see needle knitters say, oh, it looks loom knit, and that's because they're seeing this stitch over and over. And so I just want you to see that you have other options too. You can absolutely do this one, and some people need to because of dexterity issues or whatever, or the way that they can hold it. Anyway, I want you to see that there's very different knit stitches. We're going to go over in the next videos how to do the flat, the U, the true, and the E, all in the next set of videos. So be sure to click on the next video link in the description and subscribe with notifications for new lessons. We'll also have more on our website. Thanks for joining us today, where we help you stitch your love and love your stitches. See you again soon.